Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Raging wildfires in Northern California have exploded, doubling in size. And now new wildfires are torching Southern California, forcing terrified residents to flee in the middle of the night. With no rain in sight and more wind in the forecast, how will it ever end? Mark Martin has the frightening details from California.
Hundreds of fires are erupting throughout California. High winds and dry conditions fueling the flames that are threatening Los Angeles neighborhoods in the south and consuming tens of thousands of acres in the north.
Just in the last 24 hours, CAL FIRE's put out 330 fires in this state.
In Southern California, the Los Angeles Fire Department says around 10,000 residential and commercial structures were under mandatory evacuations, including homes owned by Los Angeles Laker LeBron James, former Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Walt Disney CEO Bob Iger. In Brentwood, sleeping residents had to escape their homes in the middle of the night.
It was a neighbor who rang the doorbell and said, "We got to evacuate. We got to get out right this minute."
For a time, the flames forced the shutdown of southbound lanes of the Interstate 405. Meanwhile, in the north, the Sonoma County fire has exploded in size, doubling to more than 105 square miles in just 24 hours. More than 100,000 are under mandatory evacuations, and at least 96 buildings have been destroyed. Officials say power lines may have caused 2 fires in the Bay Area, even though there have been widespread power shutoffs to keep that from happening. More than 600,000 people are set to lose power in dozens of California counties. That's on top of the more than 2 million people who were without power over the weekend in the north. The Bethel Global Response Team from Bethel Church in Redding, California, has a team on the ground in Sonoma County.
Right now, we're partnering with Salvation Army and Red Cross. The focus right now is housing and feeding the displaced. As you guys just mentioned, over 200,000 displaced.
Firefighters will have an opportunity to make progress against the fires today as those high winds die down. Unfortunately, they're expected to pick up again today and tomorrow. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Tragedy of epic proportions. And what I was saying yesterday is this going to be the, quote, new normal for California. This kind of wildfire has never happened, I don't think, in our recollection. And the fact that Southern California, which has not experienced any of these terrible fires, is breaking through. And with these winds, those sparks fly and the tinder, it just takes off. It's awful. Well, in other news, after weeks of pressure, Democrats now say the House will hold a preliminary vote on impeachment to try to determine whether some Republicans will have a chance to question witnesses. It's like putting lipstick on a pig. Ephraim Graham has more.
Pat, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced the House will vote Thursday on a resolution laying out the next steps in the impeachment process, including a procedure for holding public hearings. Republicans strongly criticized the Democrats' House impeachment inquiry for questioning witnesses behind closed doors. Last week, Senator Lindsey Graham introduced a Senate resolution condemning the process and calling it unfair to the president. 50 Senate Republicans co-sponsored that resolution. In a statement, Graham said the vote is, quote, a bit like unringing a bell. On Fox and Friends, GOP Congressman Jim Jordan said it's nothing but politics.
This is all a ridiculous, unfair, and partisan process, but the American people see through it. So I think the Speaker's going to try to dress it up a little bit, put a little lipstick on the pig, as they say, and have this vote on Thursday. But it's not going to change anything, and I think you're going to see every single Republican vote against it.
Today, a White House national security official is expected to tell the committee he twice reported his concerns about the administration's Ukraine policy to his superiors. Pat?
Ladies and gentlemen, it is so patently obvious. When this thing reaches the Senate, which it will be, there is no way that 20 Republicans are going to vote against the sitting president in an election year. They just aren't going to do it. It would be suicide, and they don't even consider it. So why would the House Democrats consider an impeachment vote? And as I said yesterday, I say it again, if they do so, they will have to face the voters with a handful of nothing instead of action on foreign policy, action on debt, action on infrastructure, and all these other things they should be doing. And instead of that, this is a illusion. There's no way an impeachment process will succeed in the Senate. And so to take a vote on that is crazy. And I said yesterday, I say it again, I don't believe there will be an impeachment vote. What's being talked about now is nothing but procedural. Well, we'll allow you now to come in and question witnesses, and Adam Schiff won't be allowed to put you in a limbo where you can't hear what the witnesses are saying. But that's way too late, and it's too little. And the Republicans, under the Constitution, deserve a whole lot more than this. And I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't boycott it. They should. Or else it's somehow, I don't know how you do it procedurally, but something needs to be done. But this whole thing is an outrage, and as I said before, I'll say it again, there is not going to be an impeachment vote in the House that really puts everybody on record. They will not face the electorate with that on their record, and the Republicans will have a field day with television spots if they do. And these people do not want to give up their jobs, and there'll be dozens of them taken out of office if they do. So all this is just smoke and mirrors. It gets some television, and I would be amazed at the television entities and the media entities that are suckered in on this thing, because it is just nonsense. Ephraim.
Pat, U.S. forces took out another high-ranking ISIS leader in Syria. Abu al-Hassan al-Muhajir was a spokesman for the Islamic State and a potential successor to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the ISIS leader killed in a strike over the weekend. Officials say they learned of Baghdadi's location after capturing one of his wives and a courier. The compound was reduced to rubble by bombs and missiles as U.S. forces and K-9s pursued him down a dead-end tunnel. The terrorist detonated a suicide vest, killing himself and 3 of his children. Baghdadi is responsible for thousands of deaths, including Kayla Mueller, an American Christian aid worker who repeatedly was raped. Military officials named the operation in her honor.
Those men and women that put their lives on the line, we owe them our sincere thanks.
No U.S. military lives were lost in the mission. The administration has released an image of a K-9 injured pursuing Baghdadi. He is recovering and is back on duty. We turn now to the situation in northeastern Syria. While many believe the fighting has stopped, people on the ground are telling a different story. Chris Mitchell now reports.
On the front lines, a small Christian relief group is reporting the ceasefire is in name only.
We were hit pretty hard today. There was Turkish armor or Turkish painted armor, 3 armored vehicles, multiple infantry, many wounded. We got in the back here. Team is treating them. Lord help make it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Dave Eubank and his Free Burma Rangers have been rescuing the wounded and helping those caught up in the fighting.
That mortar just hit right here.
He says the Turkish army, along with its jihadist allies, are continuing the attack.
Right now, the only safe zone that there is the international border between Turkey and Syria. The other zone is a genocide zone. Christians and Kurds are gone. They can't stay. They will die.
There is no ceasefire.
Dalton Thomas told CBN's Ben Kennedy on Faith Nation there's 2 safe zones inside Syria.
One for ethnic and religious minorities, protected by the Kurds, and one for ISIS, protected by Turkey. And the one safe zone was exposed yesterday with Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi being killed, and now we're seeing how far this conspiracy is actually going to go.
Al-Baghdadi's safe house sat in a Turkish protected area. Thomas and a number of others suspect Turkey shielded him. Israel's UN ambassador said Turkey's President Erdogan supported terror organizations and wants a new Muslim empire.
Erdogan is dragging Turkey down a dangerous neo-Ottoman imperialist path.
After Baghdadi's death, Thomas sees a greater threat.
Because we're seeing the rise of the true Islamic State, which is the state of Turkey.
In the midst of the crisis, Eubank and Thomas are praying for the U.S. and the international community.
But I'm praying that our country changes. And not only is guarding oil fields, which are important, but even more important are people. That's why you have oil, for people. And it's their oil. So we need to bring our troops back and draw a new line.
My prayer would be that the international community would wake up to what's actually happening and engage to stop it, because we're running out of time.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
So, Pat, where do we go from here?
Well, I think we go to recognizing who Erdogan is, that he is a thug. And the idea that there's a safe zone for ISIS fighters, it's a miracle that the president was able to get through to get al-Baghdadi. And these are a bunch of butchers, what they have done. But to think that Turkey really is the one that wants to make the caliphate, it's going to be Turkey. And if you look at the Bible, it's interesting. You know, the churches of Asia that were written about in the book of Revelation, every one of them are in modern-day Turkey. And Turkey was the home of the most flourishing of the early Christian churches. And now Erdogan wants to make it a Muslim caliphate. Much more problem, much larger than ISIS ever thought about being. And the one thing we can't do is enable Erdogan to continue this vendetta against Christians, against Yazidis, against the Kurds, to wipe them out. And there's to make a safe home for ISIS fighters. It's shocking to think that it's being done, but we need to open our eyes and recognize the threat that's still there. And, you know, we just are delighted at that attack on al-Baghdadi, and that ISIS could be in some fashion destroyed because they were vicious killers. Imagine putting somebody in a cage from Jordan, I believe it was, and then throwing gasoline on him and setting him on fire where he couldn't get out. This is the kind of atrocity that this man was involved in. It was beyond horrendous. It is absolutely barbaric. And so thank God that he's been taken out. But there's more to come and more that should be there. But the real threat is still Turkey, ladies and gentlemen. Ephraim.
Pat, here at home, a deadly mosquito-borne virus has claimed the lives of at least 13 people. While the latest victim died in Alabama, it is hardest hit in northern states. Our Caitlin Burke brings us the story from Connecticut, where experts say people are still at risk.
Fall in the Northeast is one of the most beautiful times of the year. The leaves are changing, and temperatures haven't quite plummeted just yet. But this year, officials from Massachusetts to Michigan are warning entire communities to stay indoors. That's because for the first time in more than a decade, a mosquito-transmitted virus called Triple E is killing people.
So Triple E virus is a mosquito-borne virus that occurs in the eastern half of the United States, and it's a very rare disease.
That's because the specific mosquito that carries Triple E prefers to feed on birds. Connecticut mosquito expert Philip Armstrong became concerned early in the season when his department noticed an unusually high number of this species.
We didn't have any evidence of Triple E virus until later in the season, but we knew that the conditions were right. If the virus was brought in by a migratory bird, then it could spread like wildfire, and sure enough, that's what happened.
The body's immune system can usually kill the infection, but about 1 in 20 cases develop the brain infection encephalitis. Once that happens, the odds of survival are slim.
Typically on any given year, we average about 7 human cases nationwide, but it's a very severe disease and serious illness. It kills about a third of those that develop the disease, and of those that survive, many of them suffer from lifelong neurological damage.
In Connecticut, 3 of the 4 confirmed cases with Triple E have died.
It starts off with a high fever, maybe a stiff neck, but then it will progress to confusion, seizures, and even coma and death.
Given the widespread severity, extra precautions are underway from New England to Michigan. While mosquito activity is finally winding down for the season, this year's outbreak won't be eliminated until the first hard frost. Until then, people in affected regions need to avoid mosquito bites.
That could mean doing simple measures like covering up, wearing long sleeve pants and shirts and socks and shoes when you're outdoors, particularly in the evening hours when they're most active. And consider wearing a repellent to any exposed skin surfaces as well. And that will do a long way to protecting you and your family.
Scientists at the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Center have actually found that the Triple E virus can survive the winter, even though mosquitoes don't. That means that next summer we could be faced with another Triple E outbreak. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, New Haven, Connecticut.
One reason to welcome the freeze, at least in the short term. Pat?
I'm looking forward to it. I think the sooner the better. We need a hard frost, but we're not even close to it. It's so benign down here, but so far we haven't had any great outbreak of it's Eastern equine encephalitis is what the Triple E means, Eastern equine, and brought in by migratory birds who the mosquitoes feed upon.